Well, ladies and gentlemen, we finally did it. After a long, beautiful, but grueling journey, we have finally reached the end of the Cold Steel saga, and I've triumphed over Cold Steel 4. And now I stand before you, not only a changed man, but also someone with a review of the title. So what did I think of it? Well, personally, I thought it was fantastic as fuck. But I won't lie. It's also got some stuff that I think really is the lowest Cold Steel has gotten. A group of high highs and a group of low lows. And I hope to convey that with this review. So sit back, relax, think of your favorite romance option, and let's get into my review of Cold Steel 4, a fantastically flawed finale. Okay, like usual, let's start off talking about Cold Steel 4 by bringing up just how good the game looks. Like Cold Steel 3, Ford utilizes the new engine in a marvelous fashion. You can tell just how much they improved on the shading and shot composition with each scene and character to deliver one of the best looking games Falcom has made thus far. One of the best shots in the game is in the late game involving a Hamel based side quest, and when you reach the demon to fight, the area gets covered in a deep red hue, just beautiful. And this beauty transfers over to the new areas you get to explore, from finally getting to visit Emma's village of the witches, to breaking into the gnome's factory, to tackling one of the best final dungeons in the series with the Imperial Fortress. The game looks fantastic in every single sense of the word. And that's all I really have to say about graphics. So let's get into gameplay next. Now, out of basically every Trails title I've covered so far, 4 might be the one I have the least to say about. Not that it's bad or anything, I do have some issues, but for the most part, gameplay is relatively the same from Cold Steel 3. And to be honest, that is perfectly fine. After multiple titles of giving the crew new abilities, it's fine to take a break from giving the main characters a new flashy skill to rip apart enemies. But that doesn't mean nothing of interest was added, of course, as there was an addition to the antagonist arsenal known as the Disorder System, where certain bosses could inflict order-based debuffs on your party that range from increasing your delay, to weakening your attack damage, to forcing CP and EP-based attack to cost far more. And I loved it. Thought it was a much more interesting addition than the simple stat boost thing they introduced in 3. It's not exactly used super often, but it was always welcome to see whenever it appeared. And that's pretty much all I have to say about the gameplay. So now I think it's time we got to the meat and potatoes of Cold Steel 4, and that is its story and characters. So let's start off with story first. If I were to describe the story of Cold Steel 4, I'd say it has some of the highest highs, but some of the lowest lows. And since we're on the pros section of this video, let's get into the parts I liked. For starters, the prologue itself is an instant eye-catcher. So instead of the prologue focusing on a future event or having you start right where 4 ended, you instead begin in Crossbell's Orochi Tower, and not only get to play as Lloyd and Ellie again, but you now finally get to play as Ren, Joshua, and even Estelle motherfucking Bright. Estelle had always been my absolute favorite of the Trails protagonists, so finally getting her to be playable again was an absolute treat and a half. Prologue also sets up that Ouroboros and the Ironbloods are now working together instead of fighting each other, but the arc of Claire as well, who is dealing with the heart-wrenching loss of Milliam and her struggles to cope with her death. But while the prologue is great, the best part of the game is easily the first act of the game, which focuses on the cast after they got their asses handed to them after the events of 3's ending, and the way it's handled is honestly really cool, as it's like a role reversal of how CS2 started out. Where in 2, we saw how Reen was affected by being separated from his friends. We now see how everyone from Class 7 is dealing with him and Milliam being gone. Well, almost everyone, as Musei and Ash are absent from the group. Musei leaves the group to finally begin the plan that was foreshadowed in 3, and Ash is still being held in custody for, that. And Class 7 is now at the lowest they have ever been. But if you know this crazy group of characters at this point, it's that while they may be down, they are certainly not out. Thanks to the likes of Randy and Emma's fine-ass grandma. New Class 7 rises once more to begin the search for their fellow members, but most importantly, their dear instructor. And honestly, that's exactly why I think Act 1 is the best part of the game, as throughout the entire first act and even the intermission of the game, Reen isn't in the party. Instead, the main character role is mostly left up to Yuna instead, and boy do they do a fantastic job with her. Her best moment easily is back when she convinces Musei to return to Class 7, one of the best speeches in Cold Steel easily. But while the first act is a lot to let new Class 7 shine, they aren't the only ones who get great moments, as several antagonists get great moments to shine as well. While there are some solid moments in Act 1, like Claire and Lecter resigning themselves to following Osborne, or Campanella getting genuinely pissed off and showing much more emotion than what we were used to, Sharon being conflicted on staying with Ouroboros or returning to the Reinford family. And while those moments were great, the best arc in this entire game easily goes to none other than Duvalie the Swift, who ends up leaving the Stahlritter in the intermission chapter to join forces with us. In Cold Steel 3, it was always kind of this little background foreshadowing that Duvalie was starting to slowly question if her beloved lord is truly right. And it all comes ahead in the intermission chapter, where she teams up with Crow to help out the rampaging Reen. And after an incredibly heartwarming reunion between Reen and his students, Duvalie decides to take a leave from the Stahlritter to think about what she wants to do going forward, and leaves with Crow to prepare Reen and friends for the main objective of the game, dealing with the rivalries, a Divine Knight-style battle royale where the winner becomes the next great one, all being orchestrated by the Ebon-Knightish Melga, the one behind the curse, and the being who pushed Osborne down his dark and twisted path. And after her and Crow's loss, they agree to join up with the crew and face whatever comes their way, while Duvalie works up the courage to face her master, which all comes to a head when they finally confront Arenhood, or Leanne Senlot, who gives you her reasons for why she chose to follow Osborne. And when Duvalie hears why, she chastises her master for thinking that she had to walk this road alone, while the Stahlritter and most of all her were there to help. It's a fantastic scene that really shows how much Duvalie has grown from dorky fangirl failure to a more well-rounded and more mature character. She's still a lovable dork though, so she's good. But it's made all the more heartbreaking for when Rufus, his little bitch ass, swoops in to kill her while she's down to take her power, crushing Duvalie and saddening everyone else. Even Campanella was sad, something that I pleasantly was surprised to see. I really do like how much more emotion they let him show in these last few titles. And once those tears are shed, and an Orochi's tower was liberated, the day of the war begins, and now everyone must pull together to stop not only the Calvardian invasion from happening, alongside making it so that the Mille Mirage plan, Musei's secret weapon against Osborne, doesn't have to happen, but also stop the Ebon-Knightish Melga from becoming the next great one and ending the world. So no pressure or anything. And after some fights and emotional anime speeches, you finally face off with Osborne to decide the true fate of Erebonia, in one of the best final battles in the entire series, with an amazing OST, a great 3-phase battle, and an awesome Divine Knight battle that I swear kept fucking me over due to luck and RNG in that one. Bullshit, but awesome still. That leads to one final clash between father and son, which is followed by probably one of my favorite moments in Cold Steel, of Reen and Osborne just saying goodbye to each other. Osborne's about to die, and it's really nice to see them just have one talk between each other that isn't this weird tension. It's a father-son goodbye. It's just a heartwarming, bitter, sweet finale to their arcs. It leads to the final big surprise of Cold Steel 4, the reveal that there are actually multiple endings to this game. I do admit it is a bit bizarre that they added this 7, 8 games in, but it was an interesting addition, and I did enjoy seeing the differences between the two alternate paths. The normal ending, aka the bad end of the game, has Reen sacrificing himself along with Crow and Millium going with them. Although the true ending of the game has Reen surviving and even introduces another amazing boss fight against the Great One, and a finale that not only keeps Reen alive, but brings back Crow and Millium to life. I've heard that some people don't like the true ending due to the fact that it brings characters back to life, and while I get that, trust me, I don't like fake out deaths in games either. I vastly prefer the true ending, as the normal ending kind of just goes against Reen's entire arc of learning not to place so much of a burden on himself. It's a great ending, but it does have some flaws. But it still does a great job wrapping up the Erebonia arc until Reverie comes. And last but most certainly not least, the OST is once again an absolute banger. Falcom cooks once again with the soundtrack. Every single track kicks ass in this game and might be one of the best sets so far. And that's all for my pros. So with that said, let's get over to the cons. So we've gone over several aspects of what made Cold Steel 4 such a fun ride. So now it's time for me to go over my issues with it. So I'll start off with my more minor issues before I get to the major ones. First things first, let's go over the Bond episodes. Now, Bond events have not really been something I've talked about since maybe the first Cold Steel game. That's mainly because there really wasn't a whole lot to talk about. They're events that lead to bros becoming bros or Reen a possible love interest. And that love interest aspect is kind of an issue for CS4, as it's meant to be the finale of the romances for Reen. That means basically every girl has romance scenes with him. So get ready for some insanely weird scenes that feel completely out of nowhere if you didn't spend any time with the character. Like, I barely hung out with Laura, so imagine my surprise when I hung out with her and this happened.
What the?
It's pretty freaking wild. Also, on another note in regards to romance, why on earth did Yuna and Altina just suddenly become options for Reen to romance? I really don't get it. It's not like they had some sort of history with him like several other girls did. The only ones who ever showed any sort of feelings for him in New Class 7 was Musei. It's just sort of this weird step in a wrong direction to turn both girls whose feelings for Reen really didn't have anything to do with romance into romance arcs. Hell, it would make more sense for Jubilee to have a crush on him at this point than either of these two. And she doesn't even get one. Yet these two do. It's really, really bizarre. Outside of that, though, nothing else about romance needs to be said. So let's move on to my problems with combat, an aspect of the game that I do adore, but comes with a couple of problems of its own. And that's just how much stuff was nerfed in this game. So Cold Steel 3 was stupid easy. And I'm certain the devs at Falcom realized this and started to take steps to course correct to try to bring the fourth game some iota of challenge. Except this comes with a problem. They would have to completely retool the literal dozens of game-breaking items and bosses, which would probably take way too long. So they just nerfed a lot of items and abilities, which instead causes two new problems. For one, you could still completely break the game by utilizing certain court setups, and two, several characters as a result felt far weaker than they should have been for what was basically their final game. Despite this though, most of the gameplay and its bosses were rather solid. Well, except for the one who haunts my dreams.
My shield! My shield! My shield! My shield! My shield! My shield!
Never again. Never again! Other than these complaints, no other issues with gameplay, so let's start getting into my complaints with the story and characters next. Like Cold Steel 3, 4 also I think suffers from some pacing and character issues. I'd argue the pacing is even worse in this game in comparison to 3, but that's mainly due to it being longer than 3 was. I'd argue it's at its worst in the Courageous 2, where you finally learn what the Meal Mirage plan is and bear witness to one of the coolest moments in the series. But to get that, you have to sit through so much dialogue, and I mean a lot of dialogue. And it really just kind of boils down to, hey, look at all your favorite characters, isn't that super duper cool? The girls are talking about Joshua and Estelle dating. Joshua gets to meet Ash. Look at all these characters interact. Remember Chloe? Remember? It's just so tiring to get through. And speaking on the topic of characters, oh boy, do I have some complaints about a few of them. And there are 3 in particular I want to focus on. Those 3 are Musei, Lecter, and Cedric. Let's start off with Musei, since I personally think she has the least problems of the 3 of them. I made it clear before that while I think Musei is very funny, she's also probably the weakest character New Class 7 has, and hoped that 4 could give her something, well, to do. And it did, but they kind of go off the deep end. They take this funny but pretty one-dimensional character and turn her into an OC D&D style fanfiction character that can not only mobilize and lead an army of thousands at the tender age of 17, but is also a crazy super genius who could see bad events affecting their country at the age of fucking 5 years old. What is so cool and awesome and amazing and badass that Osborn considers her nearly as big a threat as fucking Oliver. You know, the guy he dealt with for multiple games. Like, damn, I know I said give her more, but that was pretty damn excessive. The worst part about all of it is that it doesn't really make her more interesting, as all of it comes off as so insanely forced. As outside of a few moments, she is still the least interesting Class 7 member. Okay, that's out there. Let's move on to Lecter. Now, I made it very clear in the Cold Steel 3 review that I was not a fan of the direction that Lecter was being taken, but I was optimistic that 4 could win me over on it. But since we're in the con section, I'm guessing you can tell that it didn't. My biggest issue with Lecter is his motivation for staying with Osborn. As like Claire, he thought of Milliam as a fill-in for his lost family and lost the will to fight back after she died. But quick little question here. Where does he ever show that? When, at any point in the series, did we ever see him caring about Milliam in any other way other than co-workers? I've had some people say that apparently there was a scene in Cold Steel 2 that was a Milliam bonding event. And I'm gonna say right now, why on earth was it only in a bond section? If you're gonna make Milliam being dead his main motivation, then you just can't relegate their bond to a singular fucking side moment. We've had an endless abundance of time in CS3 you could have spent on making their bond more of an actual thing. But nah, who needs that, am I right? We gotta talk more on that train. And hey, at least it's just frustrating and not absolutely fucking infuriating like Cedric was. Cedric is one of the most nothing characters I've ever seen. I like the concept of him, don't get me wrong. that he basically follows Osborne after the events of CS2, as he was traumatized by the events and stuck to him as sort of a role model. But his character execution is the worst I've seen. He does pretty much nothing other than yap and fail in CS3, and in 4, while they do finally start giving him more to do, he's relegated to just losing. He has 0 moments throughout the game where he comes out on top or wows you with his skill set, but his absolute worst moment comes from the finale, where after all the awful things he's helped win, all the times he's remained loyal to the Iron Bloods, all the times he's doubled down on his beliefs, how on fucking earth does it make sense for this singular talk to get him to realize how wrong he is? Sure, I do think it could have worked, I'm not against the idea, but it should have come after the rivalry battle. Having moments where you beat him after he basically triples down on all of his beliefs and give him a hard dose of reality now that he's lost. But that isn't what happened. Now, I've had some friends tell me that they like this as a cool little way to subvert expectations, and while I see where they're coming from, I don't think it works since A, it completely goes against Cedric's character, and B, with this resolved before the fight begins, his boss fight loses a lot of thematic weight and becomes a generic rivalry fight. I've been going on about this for a while, I know, but I just need to emphasize just how much of an issue I had with his entire character, and why exactly I consider him what might be the worst part of the entire Cold Steel arc. Although I do admit, I am rather curious on where they plan to take him now that he's joining Ouroboros and seeing the world. Here's hoping they round him out more in the future. And that's all my cons in terms of story and characters. There were a few other moments, sure, like Franz Reinford only showing up in the true ending, despite it making kind of no sense on why he even shows up, considering the fact we don't do anything different, so why wasn't he in the normal ending? I don't know. The idea that Yuna, for some reason, is not made a priority in the Claire and Lecter fight, despite Claire having way more of a history with her. And of course, the infamously hilarious scene of York planning to blow his fucking brains out after the happy reunion of Elisa and Sharon. Still don't know why they didn't just have him walk away, because like, what the fuck, bro? But those are more nitpicks in the grand scheme of things, so let's move on to my final thoughts. Now that we've reached the end of this review, I'd like to say that once again, Cold Steel is a game with some of the arc's highest highs, but I also do believe it is home to some of its lowest lows. It's a game that I can constantly gust endlessly about, but at the same time also complain about relentlessly. And that is why my final rating for this game is a very flashy 8 out of 10. And with that stated, the video is finally over. We did it, folks. We have finished the Cold Steel saga. It's been one hell of a journey with all of you, and now we only have a Reverie to go before we're caught up with Trails. Before I do my like and sub routine though, I want to take a minute to thank all of you for following me along on this journey. If you've been here since the FC days, then this has been one of the best journeys I've been on in terms of playing through any sort of RPG, and I'm glad I was able to meet so many amazing people through it. With that said, I hope you remember to like and sub if you aren't already, and I hope you have a wonderful day. See you around for more RPG content.